So when we have enough for 3 to 5 people, the whole movie changes, because now look at the Ajna. We have their Ajna center existing through the Penta. And so then that conceptual facility, reality for them communing with each other, being one mind, literally, like a hive mind, through different people, that's the thing that is going to be born out of us. And so if you're human and you've got a right personality, on this slide you see the variable people who have the right personality, receptive, see all the receptives? So PRL and PRR people. We can learn through conditioning how to take advantage of the human Ajna, because the human Ajna has capabilities and we learn. But that leads to a lot of insecurity when you're trying to figure out things strategically. In your strategic thought, you're trying to, get action oriented, and, it feels very uncomfortable. Those of you who have this, went through classes. I keep thinking of Melanie every time I'm talking about this, and how challenging it was for her to go through, she's a quad right, go through analyst training the way that it was. And we worked with her the best we could so that she didn't have to feel as stressed or insecure. But you can still do it. You can still learn how to conceptualize as a right variable. This one, it's not going to be able to take in that conditioning, because they're going to live in a different dimensionality that we don't understand and that we can't conceptualize and that we can't connect with, according to Ra. So Homo sapiens and Transitus and the Rave, it's like the split off of 2 different kinds of human beings. And because we won't have, if you haven't heard of this yet, my apologies if it freaks you out, but according to Ra, we have about 1,300 years left on this planet before the planet gets hit by an asteroid. We're not going to be here, so you don't have to worry about it. The planet's going to get hit by an asteroid, and the Rave babies won't have the time to develop in the same way that we were given the 90,000 years of developing our self-reflected consciousness. They're going to develop their pentic consciousness, and there won't be a lot of them, probably because they will be gravely misunderstood as well, and institutionalized or exposed or aborted or what have you. So we will not be aware of them in their world. They will not be aware of us in our world accordingly, potentially at all, because we are in totally different, you could say, dimensions of reality. So when you look at this Rave baby, think of it as enormously vulnerable, because they are. And not all children are going to be born Raves. There will still be human babies, according to what we think of as human, but they won't have the same kind of drive for marriage and bonding and communal living and, like I mentioned, kissing. That was one of the things that really struck me, like, oh my God, can you imagine a world without kissing? Without the drive, the energy to kiss somebody, to show your affection, or hugs even, because that, that channel 3740, hugs, my child loves those. She's a 37. Okay, so there's no spleen in the pentic configuration. Those of you who are in BG5 family practice, you know this. But when we look at a group of 3 to 5 people, you're only looking at that particular area of the body graph that is now highlighted between the sacral, the G, and the throat. But it's no longer a sacral, a G, and a throat. They are areas of connectivity that don't always connect up in the place that you would expect them to, because it is not going in a multi-directional flow. Penta flows unidirectionally from the outside of the 15 and 46, inward and down, and then up through the middle, 14, 2, and then it splits off at the top. Most of the energy going through the 1-8, and then 15% on either side going to the outer column. So no splenic field, no Ajna, no head, no heart, no solar plexus field. The Penta isn't reliant on the root or any of this stuff. Now notice what you see here. You see that 49 and that 19? They're not up there in their portals because they're not actually connected to each other. So we'll still have the potential for an imprint of gate 49 and gate 19, but we won't have synthesis, a design of being sensitive. We won't have that channel, not in Raves and not in human with a new form. We won't have that. So what a Penta is, it's a material driving force. It's a construct of 3 to 5 people that come together to dominate the material plane. The word is material when you look at a pentagram. graph. That's why BG5, base group 5. They split it off from the IHDS to try and get it more distance from its esoteric backgrounds, but it's still very science fiction-like. Get 3 to 5 people together, okay, now it's only this, and everybody gets controlled and homogenized, and they make more money together because they have all these things. Material plane dominance is what a penta is there for. So if we look at the activations here, this is a pentagraph that you're looking at. The pentagraph, if we think about what it is in business or family, they have different terms, different words. And when we look at this creature, 3 to 5 children, their consciousness in group is actually going to be well equipped to deal with the material plane way better than that example of the mental projector, quad right, having to deal with the world on his own. Because this is about material plane dominance. So who the heck knows? We'll learn more in this course, but you're going to see that we'll feel like, oh, we have to protect them, and then we're going to see things that we never thought we could out of their world if we can even perceive it. It's very, very different. It's more than the sum of its parts when you look at this. It's so much more. So all of them are going to be born, again, remember, receptive. So all of the receptive consciousness of the participants coming together as an entity that inhabits multiple forms, that is very sophisticated and powerful. Ra says much more powerful than we are. And we, as a human species, Homo sapien and transitus, our perfection is to function correctly in the world alone, not in Penta in the same way that the pentic creatures, the Ra rave babies, I keep calling them Ra rave babies, are going to be experiencing life. So when it comes to living on its own, a rave baby will die, stagnation and death, unless it's cared for. And they'll probably, I imagine, how when children are starved of nourishment, when they're not given love, they're just maybe fed, basically, they don't thrive. I imagine that these rave babies, without someone to commune with at some point, they won't thrive until they start to get together with their own kind. But we are here to function alone, or perfection according to Ra. But the rave baby is here to be a part of a shared consciousness. So something more, contributing one's individuality over to a totality where you're conscious of everything. And this is the evolutionary track that our human species is on when it comes to rave. So 2 concerns here he wants us to be aware of is that we're laying the foundation for what a rave is in this course, part of 2027. And those of us who are going to have to be in service to that, what if you have a child who is born as a rave? Are you going to abandon that child? Are you going to institutionalize it? You're going to care for it? What's going to happen? So we need to have people who are aware of this at least, so that we have people that can get the information across, so that this process of the transition into these new forms that we're having, that there will be somebody to be able to educate and teach people about this, so that these children will be protected and not exposed or, maybe tortured. Who knows? Who knows what's going to become of them? My husband is very much into a lot of strange things. See, the 5-1 learns about a lot of things. And I'm not very much into looking at these very uncomfortable places of powerlessness. It's my Venus in my design. I don't like looking at powerlessness. But I've heard recently that the abortions of the babies, they're taking that and they're extracting pineal glands and using that information, that substance, for longevity potions and stuff. There's all kinds of strange things that people even now to this day doing to babies, children who are not yet born. So his concern was not necessarily for rave only. It was also about human beings into the future, because we're still going to get born, the transitus, but we won't be in a transitus form. We're going to be in a different kind of body graph form, in that synthesis is going to be broken. So 1,300 years, we're still going to have human creatures being born, and the humans that are not the ones that are left, he's not concerned about that, but the humans that are right, he's concerned about. So the dilemmas that this current day and age bring into the process that I've already discussed as an example. When they're not educated, when they're not prepared, when they're not treated accordingly, what if they're quad right, they're not aligned to their dietary regimen or how they're here to move through the world, they're just not trained to be able to trust themselves. And so they become dependent on a lot of things that lead to suffering. And I don't want that for anybody. So one of the reasons why I do this work continually and constantly, especially at the analyst or professional level, is so that there's a lot more people out there that can take this information out into the world. So people emerging with the right personalities that are not trained or cared for correctly, just like the rave babies who need a particular kind of care, are right receptive people need a specific kind of care as well. Remember, now we're looking at left and right, but from the perspective of the nodal personality consciousness, the way that you're seeing the world. So left is very narrow and strategic, is focused. Right is receptive, and you could say panoramic. You can actually apply those words up at the mental sun-earth personality construct as well. So very, very specific, narrow, strategic, or wide. Open up wide and get a lot of data in. So the other difference is that as a receptive being is taking in, think of them like an immense storage unit where they're not processing anything. Whereas when you're taking in as a left, you're only processing the thing that you're focused on, narrowly focused on, or narrowly taking in. That's the difference, and that's why we need both, where people will be able to focus and have strategies versus taking everything in. And that's the conundrum here. We're breathing in everything, and yet for the right receptive people, who they are around is going to be how intelligent they are, because they're going to get pulled from. The right people are going to draw things out of the right receptive beings. And so let other Ajnas draw and pull on your cognitive difference. And that's where you get to experience what you actually have, the power and beauty that you are here for when it comes to trusting yourself and your process, your own authority. According to Ra, he thinks that it's maybe potentially a bit easier for the right to be, you could say, retrained and to accept, to surrender, because it's in their nature to be more allowing of things, a different way of cognitive difference. But for the left, and remember again, we're talking about the mind particularly, it's strategic. So we give them programs, we give them strategies. Ra was very much over on this side, strategy, training the personality, educating the personality to get out of the way of making mental decisions. A little bit harder because you're very identified with your mind. And the strategy of letting go of what the mind is saying as something that you have to do something about has really worked well for me. I don't know about you, but that's helped me a lot. So for the right, it's not so much of a strategic process. It's trust and self-love that's going to get them there. And if you're somebody with the right personality, trusting in your authority or your truth means whatever it is, you just surrender to that. Even though you don't have any preparation, even though you might feel uncomfortable or uncertain, you feel insecure about what you're going to say or what you're going to do, by allowing whatever it is to come out of you without any identification of moralistic value judgments, particularly because, again, remember, these are people who are going to be what whomever they are with pulls out of them. So the people who are right in this cognitive difference here realign their impression of themselves and their capacity for uniqueness to a cognition that is different than what most people identify with as intelligent. So the metaphor of an emerging head center that has no ajna, that was just an illustration. So it's not literal, just to remind everybody about that. But that's kind of like what these rites are going to be moving towards. Again, remember, post February 15th, the Ides of February, which is 15th, 2027, that right there is going to be the break and the shift into a different kind of body graph. So the right in humans, as it will apply post 2027, they're all going to have a slightly different configuration, that gap right there that you can see between the 19th and the 49th gate. So that brings a change to the animal kingdom. It brings a change to spirituality. It brings a change to community. It brings a change to humanity as a channel of synthesis. Design of being sensitive is not going to be there anymore. That synthesis of, let's say, different modes of religions or different modes of communal bonding or different kinds of tribal law. I mean, it won't have the same kind of adrenalized pressure anymore. So no pressure to find God, no pressure to find the mystical, spiritual way of awakening, no pressure for the kissing or, earning a living in the same way. I mean, it's just very, very different. The gates still remain active as a potential, but not the full channel. So in a rave, we're going to explore this down the road. You're going to see how the experiential circuit in the rave, this keynote here is to collect. So it's a very different kind of circuitry that raves are going to have. This is the autive circuit that we're going to look at in future. The keynote is to meld, and that's the autive circuit. So we're going to share the same body graph, kind of like we share the same body graph with mammals, but it's going to use different names for the circuitry that we're going to explore in this class, and same channels and gates though, same color, tone, base, imprints. And this transitional form that we're in also having a shift in the drive for consciousness, So we'll see how everything comes out of us, what this new species and its emergence and its either honor and protection of it or not, because it's not like we can individually control what's going to happen to these children. But we can do our part if we feel called or if it's right for us, if some comes into our awareness. And that's why this is such important work. We need to nurture future generations, not just our left to give them strategies, but our right to honor their uniqueness, and so that everybody can be prepared for the future is one of the key elements here. Again, special attention now that given to receptive beings, that they don't have to have that strategic way of living being impressed upon them. For both the quad left and the quad right, strategy and authority is really critical to help support them in their process. Not that it isn't for everybody else, it's just that those are the two very extremes, and it's very helpful for them to have something that gives them the opportunity to know themselves, trust themselves, love and accept themselves. So we are going to have people who are human before this mutation, and we're going to have people that are right, that are human after the mutation, but they're going to be different. So more deeply oriented towards the right. According to Ra, they will need protection. They will be allowed to maintain their uniqueness because they're not raves. And that's going to be the majority or the bulk of people that are going to be born, not raves. Raves are going to be, it's going to take a while. So maybe in 100 years, we might see them really being, studied or honored or respected or something to that nature. We'll see.